Hey, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Aaron Sama. I'm General Partner at ScaleUp Malaysia. And welcome to our very first partner sessions that we're organizing for the ecosystem and for the community at large. We're an accelerator program that's been around since 2019. We've run 2 cohorts so far, and we are all about helping companies that are at the inflection point grow and scale to the next level of growth. We've done cohort 1, we did that in 2019, and we invested in 10 companies last year. We've just completed cohort 2, where we partnered with Quest Ventures, and we've invested in another 10 companies earlier this year in April. And now we're in the road, or the prelude rather, to cohort 3, where we're looking to launch the next batch of amazing companies out of Malaysia. Stripe is a partner that's come and joined us for this cohort, and we're really pleased to have them with us. And we thought we'd have these sessions where you as the community can come and ask questions, find out a little bit more about ScaleUp Malaysia perhaps, but also maybe about our partners in Stripe, and see how you can work with them and probably get the best out of their services. So I'm joined today by Sagar Gupta and Amira Karim from Stripe. I'd like to bring them on stage and let them join us, and we'll do a quick introduction to them, and then we'll get on with the session. Hey Amira, hi Sagar, how are you guys doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Great, thanks for having us.
Hey, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you with us, and with those who are watching as well. I thought we'll keep this a very simple session. We've got an hour together. We'll probably go through a couple of things, talk about Stripe, and talk about maybe some of your stories as well with Stripe as well. I also want to, towards the end, maybe touch a little bit about now what's happening with the lockdown and what your views on how companies can also get involved and kind of improve their business with the current situation. But maybe we'll start with some introductions. Maybe we'll start with you, Amira. Maybe you can share a little bit about yourself, what you do at Stripe, and maybe and how you basically came to work with Stripe.
Sure, happy to. Thank you for having us once again. Hi everyone, my name is Amira, and I lead the public policy function for the Asia Pacific for Stripe. I'm based out of Singapore, just like Sagar is. And in my role, I've worked extensively on Stripe's expansion and market entry efforts in the APAC region, including launching markets in Southeast Asia, South Asia, and East Asia. I actually joined Stripe about 3 years ago. It seems like a long time, when the company was about 1/3 of the size globally and about 1/10 of the size in Asia. So I guess in many ways, I've evolved alongside Stripe. I'm really excited to be with you today and to share, part of our story. Hopefully we can be of some use. Again, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us, and thanks for the introduction. Sagar, over to you.
Yeah, hey everyone, lovely to meet you. I'm Sagar. I'm originally from England, which explains this odd accent to hear in Singapore. But in my background, I've been a founder as well, so I know a lot of the pains that probably a lot of you are on right now. Previously, my company was funded by 500 startups and some of the folks at Lightspeed. Grew that company out. And then, more recently was doing early stage investments with Entrepreneur First. So was heading up their office in Berlin, and then was leading our investments out in India as well. So now what I do is I manage a lot of our work within the startup ecosystem. So building partnerships with amazing investors like ScaleUp. And yeah, really excited to share a little bit more about how we think about problems at Stripe. So yeah, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the introduction, and it's great to have you with us and joining us for this session. Let's talk a bit about Stripe, right? A lot of people hear the story. We know about these two brothers who had this idea for 7 lines of code, which is in our tagline for today's session. But maybe Amira, you can share with us a little bit about the history of this. How did the Collison brothers come up with the idea of Stripe? How did they, put this together, and how did it really start, right? What's the origin story?
Sure, happy to. So I think at Stripe, what we like to say is that we're building economic infrastructure for the internet. And really what that means is that we really want to make it super easy for businesses to accept payments and to run a business online. Our mission, as we like to say, and I think you might have seen it in a couple of, our collateral, is that we want to grow the GDP of the internet. And really the origin story behind that is pretty simple. John and Patrick Collison are serial entrepreneurs. They started a couple of businesses before they started Stripe, and they were perturbed by just how difficult it was for an entrepreneur to receive payments. I think back in the day, a couple of ways that you could receive payments is by check, which everyone knows is super frictionful and also very fraudy, or you had to go to the bank and get a bank transfer order, which, if you ask me, takes too much time and can lead to a lot of frustration for both entrepreneurs as well as their customers. So that really was the genesis of the idea behind Stripe. And the reason why we're called Stripe is, in the US, I think, where the founders started the company, credit card payments were really the primary way of paying. And they experimented with a couple of different names, and Stripe was probably the most elegant one. And as you can tell from the entire theme of 7 lines of code, we really prize simplicity. And that's what we really want to do for entrepreneurs. We want to, in this, really complex ecosystem, simplify for all of our users as well as their end customers. And, Aaron, I believe a lot of the people who are dialed in right now also realize that the payments industry and also, the whole notion of embedded finance these days is highly competitive, super heavily regulated, very low margin industry, which means that companies like us have to, invest in the long term at the infrastructure layer. And I guess in some respects, this is why only 14% of the economy is taking place online today. And this is something that, we're extremely devoted to. We want it to be much, much more than 14%. So payments is a far from resolved problem. I think also as we kind of grew our business, we got a lot of signals from users that payments may be one thing, one friction that they want us to solve, but there are lots of other issues. When we started out, we were a simple payments layer, but I think as we moved along, we got a lot of feedback from our users that essentially what they want is the ability to move money interoperably across borders in this kind of cloud architecture. Kind of borrowing from that seamless global notion. And so we set out to abstract away complexity across a range of financial services, building tools such as, lending, treasury, which is essentially our tool to move money across different kinds of accounts, to also develop tools to detect fraud. So I think one cheeky question, or implicit in your kind of question, Aaron, that I wanted to address also, is this notion of sort of the industry and where it's headed. So I think at Stripe, one of the things that I'm proud of and that really sets us apart is that we're really focused on partnerships. We really don't think that disruption is the right vocabulary to use. We think that it's not a zero-sum game. So, across the 10 years that we've been around, we have really developed a model of extensive partnerships. And this is across the financial ecosystem and the tech ecosystem as well that, Sagar is a lot more qualified to talk about than I am. So I think moving forward, we want to maybe reframe the game. We want to make sure that as we talk about, the advent of big tech and fintech and platform and all of that, we kind of move away and focus on the solutions. And that's really at the heart and spirit of what we do across all of our products. So I think all of this is to say that, while we abstract away complexity for our users, we are fully invested in ensuring that we are on top of all of it and can really begin to make sure that we offer services that are diverse, relevant, and locally adapted to Malaysia, to all of the jurisdictions we serve.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for that. I remember when I was, this is a long, long time ago, in one of the earliest jobs I ever had, I was interning at a company and they were doing ticketing and they had online payments, right? And what was really happening was they were taking the credit card numbers and swiping it through a terminal in the back of the office. There was a human being doing the entire process and how far things have come. And I remember the first time I ever heard of Stripe was in one of my earlier companies, and we were kind of looking for a new payment gateway. and the developers came up to us and said, "Can we use Stripe?" And I was like, "What's that?" Like, "Oh, it's super easy. We just like put in some code and it's good to go." And I was like, what sorcery is this? Because before that, the experience we had was, okay, you gotta at least through different other payment options, which are pretty good in their own right, but you had to send people to like another payment page. They'd have to then key in their bank details or their credit card details and then go somewhere else. So I thought it was really interesting how the Stripe experience was something that did not did not grow because business people knew about it, but somehow developers knew about it, right? And like I think this is really interesting, kind of like juxtaposition with a lot of other financial products, which goes for the biz guy, right, in the team.
Yeah.
Stripe goes for the tech guy, and so like maybe Sagar, you can speak a little bit to that. Like, what is this something that Stripe has done, like in the focus of trying to understand how these things spread or how the product can get viral? Was it conscious to say let's target developers, because if the developers love us, they'll love to maintain this feature on the product, and then they'll work with us to build an even better product? Was that something that the guys thought of when we started this? Hey, sorry, you're muted, Sagar. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite embarrassing on the call. No, I was saying that I guess like a lot of startups start out with like a fundamental hypothesis. Like, yeah, I'm sure the companies that you invested in, they probably have like one thing that they believe like that's correct, that like stands them in good stead for a really long time. I think one of the earliest things like John and Patrick thought when they were thinking about building Stripe was, as you were saying, like the fundamental kind of like locus of power in tech companies is very different to what it looks like in traditional businesses, where you have like procurement folks and finance folks. Whereas if you're like a nimble startup where like most of the folks are very technical, what needs to happen and what a product should look like is it really needs to be like amazing for like that small subset. And yeah, it's no surprise like Stripe started out at YC, and we really started just serving the folks that were the batchmates of like John and Patrick. They basically just like relentlessly would just like hound the folks on their program to just like adopt Stripe. And yeah, I think everyone tries to be user focused. Like it's not like surprising Stripe are exceptionally user focused, but like we really just tried to like understand each bit of the pain point about that like, developer experience in onboarding like a checkout, and like consistently improve it. And yeah, like it's still something that we retain today. Like, even though we're now like supporting like a wide range of like different types of businesses, from like your scrappy startups to the more like enterprise folks, we still have that like, how do we elevate the developer experience? And I'm sure you've probably seen like the reasons the developers actually love the product is it's easy, but also like our documentation is widely considered to be like some of the best that's available. And
right.
it actually means a very different thing for like what our go-to-market motion looks like. It's a very self-serve approach. It means actually like our account management looks very different, because again, it's primarily self-serve. Folks can go and just like read the docs and answer things themselves. So yeah, it's something that we hold very close to us and really sits within our DNA.
Yeah, I mean, one thing developers hate to do is like have to call somebody to find out how things work, right? Like they just want to just give me the documents, I'll read it, I'm good. And most developers just want to be able to be left alone to code and to build the product properly. So I think that's one thing that's really, really interesting, right? Just want to shift gears a bit. I'm gonna kind of maybe go into something that's a little bit different. Like in this part of the world, a lot of people are used to different kinds of payment methods, right? I know we started by saying that in the US, the conversation is always around like credit cards, because credit cards are probably very well used. And in this part of the world, in Malaysia, for example, a lot of people still choose to use Maybank to You or CMB Clips or one of the banking transaction platforms. How does Stripe see this as like a different model, and how does Stripe like choose to adapt the business model wherever they go?
Yeah, I can start, and then you can jump in. I think Stripe, maybe this kind of like touches a bit upon like Stripe's expansion. Whenever we have kind of expanded away from like the US, like our fundamental principles are like leverage like the strengths that we have as like a global company, but be very grounded in like the local like the countries that we're planning on expanding to. And of course, whenever we go to a place, we always need to be like cognizant of like what are the payment methods that are like most critical. For us, like we're always very driven by what our users are telling us. Like with some of the folks, be it the startups, be it the enterprises, like what are the payment methods that they most demand? And that could be credit cards, but like, as you're saying, in Malaysia, there are a ton of different things. And I think for us, we had a big integration with like FPX, which now meant that we can serve a lot more folks. But we know we have a lot to go. Like there are a lot of these like smaller wallets that are popping up that have like smaller fragments. And we hope to get to the point at which like our coverage is a lot broader and a lot deeper. And yeah, like, as we're growing, I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah, I remember I think I was there at the launch of Stripe in Malaysia at the event that you guys had. I think it was in the Glass House or something. And FPX was like a big deal. Like it was like it was like kind of the core of the release almost, right? Like, we've got Stripe here, but we've also got FPX, which I think is core to kind of what you're saying in the value that Stripe has in putting it on the users and recognizing that every market has certain needs, right? I think that's really interesting. Yeah. But Stripe has also been very well used by big clients as well, right? I think like companies like Deliveroo, Booking.com, Lyft, Shopify. And how do you think Stripe was able to do this, to get these large corporations to believe in it? And I mean, there are probably a lot of startup founders listening to you here from the different feeds. I think we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. And people are listening in from different channels as well. I think there's a Zoom link somewhere. So I think the idea is, and of course, people are going to be listening to this for weeks and weeks to come. I think the question for every young startup is, how do I have this little thing that I'm building with my 5-6 man team, and how do I serve the big clients? What is the approach that Stripe takes in reaching these clients? I think maybe Sagar, you can take this one.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, like every startup will have their users that they can serve really effectively now, and those that they want to serve in the future. So for Stripe, we're very much like a product-led growth company. We allow folks to like use the product for free, get used to it, see the magic in it, and then like build a business case for it with like decision makers. And we really, when we started out, we could only really do that for like tiny startups, like YC kind of companies, because we didn't have like good supportability for enterprise. And I think I'm sure a lot of folks have seen that like 2x2 matrix, where it's like the complexity of the sale versus like the value of the sale. Everyone starts at the bottom left, and that you want to try and have like a very easy sale, but like it's not worth a crazy amount. You want to end up getting the top right. Now, we've made that transition over a really long time. Like we still have a long way to. With one of our kind of like company mottos is like we haven't won yet, and we really feel like we haven't won yet. Some of the like larger users, but what we have done is just like step by step. Like we've for one like grown with our users. So like the Lyft of the world, we would have like started with them when they were a tiny company, and for every like funding round that they went on, as they were like more demanding of us, we kind of grew. But I think broadly like our like, muscles have just been like kind of like honed over being exposed to like more and more different users, but it really isn't easy. And so I do think like for the startups on the call, just be really clear on like who your users are like now. It's great that you're going to be able to serve like different segments in the future, but you do be aware it's a very like different skill set. Your org will need to look very different. Like your go-to-market will need to look very different, and you can do that. But just I always sometimes see startups trying to like win with like the enterprise folks like super early, or just like go up market a little bit like too early. When
go for the big fish first, right? Because then everybody gets to eat, right? Like that's the idea.
Yeah, and it can be that actually focusing just on the enterprise because you're building enterprise product the inception means that you're doing like the right strategy for yourself. But it's more like hopping between segments can sometimes mean like your core value proposition can be diluted a little. Yeah, Amira, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how, for a lot of early stage companies, there's often a trade-off between kind of going after bigger users, so moving up the value chain, as you say, or expanding to another market where you can serve a very similar segment of users, other scale-ups or other startups that look like and feel like a lot of your existing ones. I guess fundamentally, even as you're thinking about those trade-offs, if it is one at all, especially given efficiency of resources and all that. One of the things that's really helped us adapt to Asia, which is extremely fragmented, is to pay attention to how users behave. So it's not really just the users and how big they are, but also what is the behavior around payments. And what do those trends mean and how do they translate for your business? One example that I can think of really is that, with the rise of hyper-local digital platforms, especially relevant for the kind of post-COVID recovery era, where a lot of, smaller companies have transitioned online, what do these hyper-local digital platforms want? How do you break it down into different subsets of services? In many parts of APAC, we've helped SMEs in traditionally offline sectors really pivot to online and reach consumers directly on the internet, and that requires a different kind of handholding, a different kind of service to those customers. And then there's also, of course, the advent of the big tech super apps, the likes of Grab and Kakao and WeChat. How do those users behave? How do merchants on that platform transact with their users? What kind of embedded finance tools do they utilize to either, support or boost demand, or, support their merchants tide over the difficult times? So behavior is really different. And, I think another layer in Asia is also trust. I think the differences between a lot of the developed markets in APAC and EMEA and in the US is the differential levels of trust. And I think a lot of businesses that don't realize that sometimes some frictions do help customers feel safer to transact. Those are the kinds of things that, we've observed some of our more successful users do pay attention to.
Can you unpack that a little bit, like how some friction helps more customers feel more comfortable? Because that's kind of almost counterintuitive, right, to a lot of people. I thought that's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think trust is multi-layered. I think, to a large extent, a lot of folks that are coming online for the first time, merchants as well as consumers, are not really used to transaction flows, or not even used to how e-commerce operates. And so they rely on, gates like, two-factor authentication or additional, information required online, to feel like they're safe in performing the task online. Whether it is setting up an account that allows them to have that kind of level of contact with the website or with the kind of particular portal. So we've observed that is a big issue for parts of Asia. And then trust also is about sort of ensuring that there's digital literacy, right? A lot of companies now have taken it upon themselves, and we've partnered with a couple of local platforms and super app types to ensure that folks understand how things work, so they feel confident, and that kind of pays off dividends in the long term and drives up utilization, adoption of tools, and the whole spectrum.
Right. Okay. That's a great answer. Thanks, Amira. So I'm going to actually break to ask a question from one of our listeners. This comes from YouTube, and it's kind of pointed, but kind of related to what we're talking about as well. So I thought I'll interject there, and then we'll see how it goes. And a side note for those who are listening on the various platforms, if you want to ask questions, just ask in the chat box, and I'll ask our guests the questions on air, and we'll try to get to as many of these questions as possible. So Lim Chu Chuan on YouTube asks, how do you position against the local players like IP88, EGHL, Bill Please, I think, and etc. In terms of pricing and features? So it's maybe a little bit pointed, but I guess I'll pass it a bit. Do you see them as competitors or potential partners? And if they are competitors, how do you kind of see yourself stacking up against them? Yeah.
I can again kick off, and then Amira, please you chime in. I think any startup, and we still consider ourselves a startup, is going to have competition. It's just a sign of a healthy market. And anytime that we try and enter a market, we always think about where are we going to play? So what kind of users we want to try and work with, and how are we actually going to win? And so when we're entering a place like Malaysia, again, what our focus tends to be on is some of the very, very fast growing startups that have international aspirations, where they need to do cross-border transactions, where the failure rate, if they were accepting a payment in a different country, would be pretty high. But we also try and think about those platforms. We always try and deliver a great experience for marketplaces, SaaS platforms. And again, when it comes to the where we'll play and how we'll win, how we win is we do think that we have a great product called Stripe Connect, which allows you to manage the flows very correctly. But we always do believe that the other local players are each to their own, and I'm sure they contribute a ton to the ecosystem in many ways, and we really do see them as complementary. A lot of folks multi-processor, so they use Stripe for cross-border transactions, but a local player. So yeah, it doesn't tend to be one player for everything.
Ah, cool. Yeah, so you see there's a role for all these different players in the market, and you know kind of the space that Stripe kind of plays in. Yeah, I think that's so.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool. I thought maybe we'd go into a little bit of a different kind of conversation, a little bit about the expansion process that Stripe has gone on. And then later on, I want to talk a little bit about culture, because I think one of the big things about Stripe is the culture within the team. And I think that's really interesting to talk about, right? So Stripe started in 2009. Maybe Amira can share a little bit about the background of when Stripe began, because then it went into the UK in 2013. What were the considerations for that internationalization process and how it grew from those markets? But also, before you start on that, just talk about 2009 and what was happening then, because I'm old enough to remember what the market was in a bit of a flux then as well. So very similar to where we are now. And I guess what lessons could have been learned from that experience?
Sure, happy to. And I was also old enough to remember the crisis then. Yes. So I think that, back to the origin story, 2009 was really when Stripe went to market. I think the idea was, born about a year before that, and 2009 is when things became more viable. And the reason why we chose the UK and progressed to Canada is, I think, the natural affinity with the US payment system. I think the payment method coverage that we offered, as well as the kind of companies that we were confident in serving, really kind of made the decision for us in that respect. And as you know, the UK is sort of a natural extension of our dual or transatlantic heritage. Between the brothers in Ireland and spending a lot of time in the US. So I think those were natural progressions, if you will. But I think the road to internationalization really got interesting, really got spicy when they started looking at different Asian markets, right? And expansion is very, very hard, as I'm sure you know, Aaron, and I'm sure a lot of people here who are involved in their own expansion plans. You have to think about, not only the total addressable market to kind of make that thesis known to your investors and your shareholders, but also to be really aware and confident that you are able to enter the ecosystem. Now, for us, because we operate in a regulated space, we're really kind of, very much part of this extensively regulated ecosystem. So we have to do a lot of homework before we go into any market. And that involves a lot of prior scoping, as well as a lot of analysis and understanding of the market. The other thing that I think makes internationalization hard is that because we work in a partnership model, we have to be confident about the partners that we work with. And that takes time to develop as well. We work in conjunction with many existing incumbents, banks, fintechs, and other players in the ecosystem, be it other payments companies, big banks or other tech companies. So it does take us some time to figure that out. In Asia, I think what's really interesting is that you've seen this rise of digital economy growth in places like Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia. But how do you then sequence the growth, right? And there isn't really a secret sauce in our orientation or how we've developed that internationalization strategy. One is that we are, very user-oriented still. So we're religious about listening to feedback from our users, and we use the responses and the write-ins that they give us as, an indication of which market we should think about entering next. In fact, we had a really interesting entrepreneur tweet at President Jokowi to let Stripe in, which really was an honor, but really put the pressure on our team to hurry up and get into Indonesia. So, we're very user focused. And then also we think about anchor markets, which is why we prioritize Malaysia and why we launched Malaysia prior to some of the other economies in Southeast Asia, because of not only the potential of domestic businesses, but the demand from other companies and investors from outside of Malaysia. And one last thing I'll say before I kind of let Sagar jump in as well, is that we tend to also be extremely mission driven. As you know, we have a product called Atlas, and Atlas's mission is to ensure that geography is not a factor in entrepreneurship, in success. And so part of our kind of formula or calculation is where we need it the most, between say Mongolia to Pakistan to Uzbekistan, which countries where we can, are we able to make the most difference? So that factors into the calculation as well from a mission standpoint. Sagar, anything else to add from your side?
No, I think that was great. I think you covered a lot of points. I feel like the one thing I would just add is when it comes to us scaling, I think it does look very different from what a normal company scaling looks like. Because we're fintech, we're working in super regulated markets. It's not easy for us to just go and set up in places like Indonesia. But again, I do think that it's worthwhile for any startup to be quite deliberate when they are thinking about scaling. A lot of folks, feel very constrained by the markets that they're in, particularly in Southeast Asia where they're a little smaller, and just feel the need to go and expand a little bit before it's too early. I feel we're very deliberate even at this stage, with doing, as Amira said, our TAM, what are the users we're going to go after, how we're going to win them, what does that mean for our go-to-market team. We're very, very lean even when it comes to actually launching operations. So I think that because it's now a little bit easier to scale than it has been before, it's a real blessing that you can launch from more remotely. It doesn't mean that you should lose focus, I think, is my one bit of advice for startups.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Just now, Amira mentioned the idea of sequencing your growth, right? And then what comes first. And then Sagar, you're mentioning about the idea of being deliberate. I think that's something that a lot of early stage founders maybe don't understand when we are growing to other markets or other verticals, is to be very, very focused and deliberate in what you're doing and still be very lean about it as well. Sometimes when you have a little bit of cash, you throw as much as you can against the wall. Hopefully it'll stick the same way it did at home, but it doesn't always work that way. And so I think that's really important. I mean, that idea of being very lean and deliberate is kind of valuable as well. We've got a whole bunch of questions that have come in, so I'm going to take those questions because I think it's really kind of interesting. There is a crypto question, but I'll save that for later because I think that's kind of fun. But I think more or less in line with what we're talking about here, about going from different markets, and just now we were talking about how Malaysia's had a huge growth in digitalization in the digital economy. Here, the government has made a lot of effort into trying to get SMEs online and individuals online through different initiatives. Of course, COVID has been the great digital disruptor that we've all kind of been enjoying in a way, because people have had no choice but to kind of adopt new solutions. But I guess the question that I have is from Satu Creative on YouTube, and he asks, what are the common concerns among non-digital native merchants in adopting payment platforms? What are Stripe's key strategies in addressing this?
I can kick us off. I think, as we've kind of alluded to, like in the past, like Stripe has been a product aimed at developers, which, to like Satu's point, has maybe meant that like we haven't always been able to like support some of the folks that maybe have like less digital literacy. Now, having said that, like Stripe, one of our biggest kind of like areas where we get users is through like platforms. So we work very closely with Shopify, Squarespace, like Wix. For those folks that need like no-code solutions, they can integrate Stripe just like with a click of a button through platforms. But having said that, we even now are trying to like be really doubling down more on like no-code solutions. Just last week, we announced that we have like a payment links product, which allows folks to just instantly spin up a payment page and just text it via WhatsApp or any kind of messaging platform and get paid through there. So we're definitely trying to kind of like expand our product offering, and our velocity is really speeding up, particularly since like our last like fundraise. But we are very aware that in different places, particularly maybe even out in this region, non-digital natives need different ways, and we always hope to support them either through our own product or through partners.
Is there an interesting story like of somebody who's never been digital before but using Stripe from this part of the world that you could talk about maybe? Is there a case study? Sorry to put you on the spot, but there's no fun if I don't do that, right? So,
Amira, did you have any from the study though?
Yeah, there are several that I've been very impressed by. One example that I love is my favorite laksa place in Singapore. We're not going to go into detail about whether
laksa in Singapore.
I know you were going to do that, Aaron. It's a different conversation. But our Singapore laksa place that I love, very comparable to Malaysian standards, was just really in a bind, right? As COVID-19 restrictions hit, all the hawker centers were closed. And you couldn't really dine in. And in the early part of COVID, they weren't even allowed to really function above a certain time period. So essentially, we worked with this platform called Odl, which is a food delivery platform. And they advertised on Odl and were able to kind of set up and begin delivering laksa within 24 hours. And we've featured them in a couple of our collaterals, which I find really interesting. And then also a lot of supermarkets have come online. A lot of kind of retailers like Fair Price and a number of other grocery stores have come online and have really rapidly scaled their online operations as well. One other really good example I find is on bicycles or gyms, right? So gyms used to use Stripe to essentially allow for subscriptions. So every month when you go to Fitness First or something, you pay your bill through Stripe, for example. But gyms were also closed. But what they did was to rent out equipment. So you were able to pivot from the subscription-based model for membership to being able to rent, bicycles and equipment, and really allow them to get some revenue during COVID-19. So I thought that was really fascinating how they pivoted so quickly.
Yeah. Like my gym is also renting out like the rowers and their bikes and their kettlebells and stuff. I think that's like a new trend, and it's cool that you're actually seeing this like happen on an active basis with your clientele as well. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and I guess I would be remiss if I also didn't add that health tech is really an area of growth, and we worked with a number of users last year. I think the health tech sector has always been on the rise in this part of the world. So one of the examples that I love quoting is Doctorlib, which is essentially a medical website that dispenses advice as well as some levels of prescription drugs, medication, and we're able to come online really quickly. So people didn't have to rush to clinics for their appointments.
Cool. All right. I think that's really cool. I think it's really exciting to see how businesses are adapting to the situation, learning to have to find other ways to survive, and it's really encouraging to see Stripe play a role in that story. And it's great that you had that at the ready, even though I kind of threw that on you at the last minute. I got a really quick question from Ryan Joe Ahmad over on YouTube. Thanks for sharing. As a biz doing designer goods and stocks, and all stocks are sourced directly from authorized brand distributors, may I know what's the policy on supporting document to comply with? So it's probably a quick answer, but maybe you can point him to where he can get all the policy documents on your website.
Yeah, sure. So if you visit like the Stripe website, there'll probably be a lot of documentation on what kind of businesses we support. Fortunately, we support a lot of businesses, but we do have to comply with a lot of like regulations. So we just encourage you to like take a look through, and then if you still are a little stuck, you can either email in. The team are great, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you out very quickly.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that, Sagar. So I thought maybe we'll shift gears a bit. Khalil, hang on. We'll get to your crypto question in a second. We'll get to that. But I thought maybe we'll go and talk about people and culture, because I think in every organization that's really important. And I think at least in the interactions we have with the two of you, we've seen that there's a very strong sense of mission focus and idea of what you guys are up to. There's a lot of passion behind what you're doing. So I think that's really exciting. And so I think startups who are listening in can learn a lot from this, and especially a company at scale like Stripe can also teach this to earlier stage companies. So in an interview in 2018, Patrick Collison talked about how he values, what he values in hires. So it's his first kind of rigor and clarity of thought. So many organizations prize smoothness in interactions and trying to reduce and minimize the number of ruffled feathers. So is that kind of the culture in Stripe? Are you guys very direct, blunt with each other? Are you really kind of focused on being very clear when you talk to each other? Or are you like the rest of us and we're trying to figure things out as we go? How does this work?
I can answer first, and Sagar, definitely feel free to jump in. So I think, Patrick's statement with regards to rigor is really very much still a core value. I think meticulousness and kind of clarity and rigor of thought is certainly a big part of Stripe culture, and will continue to be from all intents and purposes. I think that, the company has obviously grown exponentially since I joined. And so culture is really a living thing. And so it grows and adapts to, the number of people, where they come from, the local nuances of your offices. But I think that the good thing about the Stripe culture is that it's still anchored on a couple of values. And one of my favorite ones is really humility. I think that a lot of companies, especially the ones who are still starting out, need to recognize that curiosity should be matched with the humility of knowing that you don't have all the answers. And I guess maybe that's an extension of our partnership mentality. We know that we don't have all the answers, therefore we work with so many different people. I think the humility component also means that we don't mind being wrong. So, in a conversation, and Sagar and I have been in a couple of meetings together, kind of looking at the problem from all angles and really kind of knowing that all of this comes with good intentions. So I think it has to be kind of coupled with that, right? The other thing that I really love about Stripe culture still is that there's a lot of hunger and hustle. So despite being a really big company, we're still very hungry for growth, for knowledge, for development and expansion, which I think is really makes it an exciting place to be in. And the last thing I would say is that the culture that the brothers set at the top really do permeate downwards. So the intellectualism is certainly one of them. The humility is something that they personally embody as well. The hustle and hunger. And the other thing that I find maybe is an Irish trait, perhaps, is politeness. So, you're not polite or nice because, there's something behind that, but there's a genuine sense of authenticity, which I find really refreshing. But yeah, that's my perspective, I guess, for...
Yeah, I think that's really...
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Like, one of the things that kind of alluded to, but everyone's quite nice at Stripe. Like, it's one of our like qualities. I think that we really spend a lot of time working with each other, and we want to create environments that are like open to like diversity of thought, like diversity of people. And even though we're like moving like remarkably quickly, we're like hiring a lot. I think everyone is like quite thoughtful. And it just answering your point, like I think being direct is more like can sometimes be seen as like a pejorative, but we kind of like interpret it as like we want to try and get to like answers quicker. And like it really comes back to like, yeah, there's no like I have a ton of ego, like this is definitely the way of doing it. It's more like, let's try and look at first principles, like what are we trying to do and how do we get to the right answer quicker. But yeah,
I think like
culture. I would be remiss to also the fact that we are hiring a lot. So if anyone likes what the culture sounds like, then they're happy to reach out to us.
Are you hiring in Singapore, or is there going to be a team in Malaysia?
We're hiring across many different places, like primarily in Singapore. But again, just take a look through the website. If there's anything that might be interesting, then I'm sure we'd be happy to chat.
And also remote. So Stripe, is unique in the sense that we have remote hubs, not just for engineering, but a lot of other functions as well. So a lot of people have gone remote recently.
Yeah. And I guess you don't have much of a choice, I guess, with the current climate, right? Everybody's in lockdown, I suppose. I thought it was really interesting when juxtaposed the idea of being intellectual and being humble at the same time. I thought that was really interesting. And then Sagar, what you said later about how when you're being direct, it's not about being rude, but about getting to the point. Because I think like very Asian people feel that we have to kind of save face or not be too direct because that's the way we were brought up and the way we kind of feel we should interact with people. And then when we see people being awfully blunt in an interaction, sometimes it's very difficult for us to kind of handle because we're not used to that. So how do you see like humility and intellectualism kind of meet in the middle? Because a lot of the smart guys I know are generally not the most pleasant people to be around because they're very they think they're smarter than everybody else. But how does that work? Yeah.
Maybe I'll give one example. Like one of the like things you'll notice when you first join Stripe is there's like a huge like obsession with like docs, like over like presentations, over like in-person meetings. You kind of believe that like documents are quite like a democratizing force. Like it's not like who speaks the loudest, who speaks like the clearest. It's kind of like, hey, these are all the information that we like currently have. This is our best understanding. If people have like conflicting information that can help us make a better decision, then great. We will adapt what we're thinking. But like I feel like that always, all our documents are very like heavily footnoted. So we're like referencing the sources. So there's still that intellectualness to it, but then like we keep a lot of our documents like very open to like the whole of the company, such that any person would like from a different team can just go in and comment and just say, hey, have you thought about this? So we hope that encourages us to like get to the right answer quicker.
Yeah, cool. So guys, we're almost at the end of the hour. So I want to maybe go to some more current issues, I guess, and maybe looking towards the future. So I guess the first question, I guess, is what do you see as like the future of payments, right? How do you think companies are going to build businesses in the future, and how do you think Stripe can play a role in that payment ecosystem?
I can go again. Again, like always the cop-out answer, but I feel like the answers just come for us from like our users. And like, but anyway, one big trend that we see quite happening a lot is just in like embedded finance. Like I'm sure everyone's probably read that like A16Z article that like
maybe just for those who maybe are not familiar, explain what embedded finance is and
So kind of a lot of it stems from the like Andreessen Horowitz kind of article that they kind of encapsulated pretty well, that like every company is going to be like a fintech company. And that kind of means that for like lots and lots of different sectors, like part of like where they're going to be able to like retain their users, deliver like exceptional experiences is by delivering like financial products. Like I think Grab is like a pretty clear example of like being able to start having like their own like wallet, being able to start opening up like bank accounts for some of their drivers. This is kind of the evolution that we're seeing and that like we hope to be powering. So out in the US, we launched Stripe Treasury, which means that like platforms can actually create bank accounts for all of their users. We have Stripe Capital, which means that those platforms can advance loans for some of their users, meaning that, like, again, like the velocity of their growth will be quicker. But there will also be a lot of like advances in terms of like payments, in terms of like one-click checkout, in terms of like wider availability of like payment methods, maybe even crypto at some point. But yeah, I'm sure it's an exciting time. And one of the good things is working with so many startups is we learn from them as well, and we learn from the markets.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, definitely. One of the things I'm really excited by is the advent of open banking. And I think different countries call it different things, open APIs, open banking. And I think the trend is really catching on in Asia. And I'm very encouraged by that because it means, to Sagar's point, the democratization of access to financial services. So you're not at the behest of only a couple of incumbent players, and innovation can really take place. And I think that will actually speed up the innovation life cycle and also the ability for fintechs to make revenue that allows them to scale. So super excited about open banking and what it can bring about. And I think payments as a service will really be one of the entry points towards financial inclusion. Now, I think we've been thinking about financial inclusion from the banking architecture perspective, kind of getting bank accounts for those who don't have them, or kind of providing, mobile payments as a way to get people the ability to transfer money. But I really do think that payments, because it's a great entry point for entrepreneurs and individual entrepreneurs specifically, can be an entry point towards getting data that gives you the ability to borrow money, to buy insurance, and to do a whole lot of other things to scale your business, or even to take out loans for housing and things like that. So I feel like payments is quickly becoming an entry point because of the advent of embedded finance, which is really exciting as well.
Yeah, that is really exciting. I think the fact that now the barriers are getting thinner. It's not something that's only for certain people. Not you don't have to have from work in a bank to be able to figure out how to take a payment. Now, 7 lines of code can do it as well. I think that's a really exciting thing for the market and how we can grow the business around. And I thought, Sagar, was really interesting what you said just now about how every business will be a financial business at some point, because that's where things are getting to as well. But also, since you also brought up crypto, I think we'll answer Khalil Himara's question from YouTube. So Khalil asks, what's Stripe's game plan when it comes to merging with the cryptocurrency world and accepting crypto as a mode? And I guess he's asking, are you looking to accept crypto as a mode of payment?
Yeah, so I think we always reflect on these kind of things at Stripe, and like the founders are pretty transparent with like how we're thinking about it. And to be honest, like we haven't really seen like a ton of demand from folks that actually want to pay in like cryptocurrencies. Like, if you do want to be paying in like Bitcoin, it's probably like not a good idea. Like I actually have a story. I have a bad story to tell with me losing a lot of money by spending a few Bitcoin on like just a wallet when I was out in like the US. But yeah, it's kind of like, I don't think people actually want to do that, such that it doesn't really fall like high within our priorities like right now. Right now we've got like so much upside to be had in like in Asia. Like we can be launching very quickly in like new places like LATAM as well. Like having said that, like, do we see a world in which like as more and more like stable coins are like being brought into like wider usage, as like the policy like framework like evolves to like make that more normal? Could we support it? Like, we'd definitely be interested in exploring that, because we just want to deliver like amazing experiences for folks that want to move money around easily.
Cool. I mean, you can't avoid a crypto question because it's kind of the thing of the day, and every day when Elon Musk wakes up and tweets something, everybody talks about crypto, I guess. So thanks for taking that, and I hope that answers. Yeah, you have a response, Amira? Yeah.
I think that Elon Musk aside, the thing that really gets me excited about crypto is CBDCs. So I think that central bank digital currencies is really catching on as a trend around the world. I think obviously you have China, which is leading the charge for the digital yuan, but with a very different kind of model. And I believe the EU is also looking into their own version of central bank digital currencies. And a lot of governments are stepping up to look at reframing the conversation on crypto because they're interested in the potential of CBDCs. I think that that's going to be a really interesting development because it could mean a range of things, right? It could mean faster clearing and settlement. It could mean that there is more monetary policy flexibility. It could mean that essentially the way that we have reconfigured or configured currencies could really change and remove some dependencies globally. Is that a good or bad thing? I think the jury's still out. But I would put my money, pun intended, on the fact that CBDCs is going to be the other thing that we should be watching apart from, Elon and Dogecoin and the rest.
Yeah. I mean, even in KL, there's some interesting things happening. In Malaysia, there's SC is working on a framework for digital exchanges in Malaysia as well. So I think it's coming, but I think like what you guys are all saying is it's not really there yet in the average consumer, and I think there's a huge market to already serve. I guess in the last 5 minutes, I suppose what I would like to kind of get to is, I guess currently we're in a lockdown in Malaysia, and I guess Singapore is in something similar, maybe not as extreme as what we're going through here. And if I'm a business owner and I don't know how to get my business online, what would be the best advice you give them? Like how do you think they should do it? How do you think they should get involved with it? And I guess since we have less time, I'm just going to join the question with, is this going to be the permanent state of affairs? Will things never really go back to the way it was before? Adopting something now is something that will serve them for many, many years to
come. I think I feel unqualified to prognosticate about whether it will remain like this for perpetuity. I hope that it doesn't. What I do hope though is that like there are tools that do allow folks to like access like the internet economy in like a really, really easy way that has been like forced upon with the pandemic. I think just for business owners, we do really appreciate that, like, to the point that maybe they're not digitally native, maybe it's really big shocks that like folks are going through. But there are a lot of like really easy like no code solutions. There are solutions that operate through like WhatsApp. I think going for like the simplest option that like serves your customers is probably like a good way forward. And I don't want to keep plugging this like payment links product, but it really is like you join Stripe's website, you open up an account, you can start like creating billing, recurring payments as well through that. And then you don't even need to have like a website to even accept that payment. So, do very aware that challenging times and hoping that people are able to take care of their businesses.
Amira, do you have anything you want to add to that, or?
Just very quickly, I think that even as the economies do open up, I don't think that things will go completely back to where they used to be. Some stats from the US, I guess that could be relevant. One is that we noticed that new demographics are staying online. So the boomers and that generation are really beginning to, engage in online commerce. A lot of offline sectors have come online, and there are signs that they're here to stay. I think in the UK, online grocery sales have doubled during the early pandemic and have stayed there. And then also the geographic distribution of online activity has changed. So a lot of like rural areas and a lot of markets where you wouldn't really associate with e-commerce are really coming online. So in that respect, it's still ripe for expansion and internationalization if that's something that you all are looking at.
Thank you. All right, I guess we're at the end of the hour, and I thought maybe I'll give you both some time maybe to share a little bit of some closing thoughts before we close off today. Maybe some how you think it could be something about the future, something about Stripe, or maybe how people can connect with Stripe moving forward. So maybe we'll start with Amira, ladies first, and then we'll end up with Sagar. Yeah.
Just wanted to thank you again, Aaron, for having me on the program, and also, it's been fascinating to listen into the questions. Stripe is a very open company, so if you have any feedback about our products or any questions, as Sagar mentioned, do reach out to us. We love hearing from users and prospective partners. So thanks again.
Awesome. You're very welcome, Amira.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we're so bullish on the region. We're so excited by the kind of companies that we work with now in Malaysia, and maybe for any current or aspiring entrepreneurs, it's probably never been a better time to start a company. The barriers of it are dropping so much. You have amazing investors, and so do just take in the best of the ecosystem with folks like ScaleUp, and if we can play a small part in that, do reach out. We love working with all kinds of businesses. So I'm sure you share some of our details after, Aaron. But
sure.
Yeah, it was great chatting all of you virtually even.
Yeah, we'll provide some links maybe below the videos and stuff, so people can follow you guys. So those are listening. This is a prelude session we're doing for Cohort 3. Cohort 3 is starting very, very soon. And for those who want to know more about Cohort 3 or even pre-register for Cohort 3, you can go to scaleup.my and you can pre-register right there. There's a question also I see in the chat room asking a little bit about how Stripe's participating in Cohort 3. So stay tuned. We'll be kind of making more announcements soon with regards to how we're going to work with Stripe and how you get benefits from being part of our network with Stripe and with ScaleUp Malaysia. So I'm Aaron Sama. Thank you, Amira, Karim. Thank you, Sagar, Gupta. We'll see you guys for the next session. Take care and stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.